everyone, and welcome to The Art of Giving, a guide to nonprofit success. And today we have a special guest, Dan Durkin from Sky Art, which is a Chicago nonprofit. And we are going to be talking everything fundraising, so fundraising strategies. And he has a unique background he's going to share with us, and that can give us all a unique perspective on fundraising for our nonprofit. So, Dan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and Sky Art?
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be able to talk on the subject. I'm very excited about it. So my background is I've actually been in corporate for most of my career in the software industry and sales and marketing. And I've been kind of connecting to nonprofits for about the last 8 years. So I volunteered in a nonprofit and helped with fundraising and capital campaign and help with their events. And it just really hooked me into this industry. And so I made a decision a couple of years ago to leave the corporate world and decided that for the next 10 years, I'm going to dedicate my life to nonprofits.
A little bit more rewarding.
Yeah. It's a purpose-filled, mission-filled experience. So I'm very happy to be doing that. I also joined a board recently of a nonprofit, but I'm now a development manager for Sky Art, and I've held that position since April of last year. And I'm really excited. Sky Art has been a nonprofit since 2001. So we really have a long history and perspective about running a nonprofit and all the opportunities and challenges. We provide free arts programs to youth in Chicago, mostly on the south and west sides. And then we also provide art therapy programs as well. So
we have a lot of synergies, and I love it.
Yeah, we do. That's why I think we met recently and talked about it. So it's great to be here.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you. So you mentioned that you just started in the nonprofit world, and you're going to be dedicating your life, for the next 10 years. What did you do prior, that brings, knowledge and experience into this sector?
Well, fundraising is a lot like sales, or sales is a lot like fundraising.
Very true. Yeah.
My more recent experience in software is as an executive. I manage teams globally, and our focus as a team was on our largest customers, so our most strategic partnerships.
Okay.
So we did a lot of planning, strategy, execution on how do we build and maintain relationships with these large global, customers, which is it's a multifaceted kind of approach where you have to figure out ways to interact with them over a year's time.
Right.
And so that they always feel like they're engaged.
Right.
And so I figured it seemed
cultivating the relationship.
It's like stewardship, right?
Yeah.
We use different terms in corporate versus nonprofit.
Yeah.
But when I look at board members and I look at major donors, that translates really well into nonprofits. So it's been a kind of a smooth transition.
Yeah. Well, the last episode we had was on board development, and we had our executive director, Donna Bliss, on. And we talked a little bit about, the board's responsibilities within an organization, but I think you're going to bring a new perspective to that from a fundraising strategy, or, standpoint, not strategy. Are your board members expected to help fundraise, and in what ways, if so?
Yeah, so our board has been built over the years. So again, we started in 2001. Our founder and CEO, Sarah Ward, recently transitioned out of leading the organization. Devin Van Houten Maldonado is now our executive director.
That's a mouthful. What was his name?
Devin Van Houten Maldonado.
Okay, all right.
And he comes with a lot of experience as a director of our program, so he understands really the fundamentals. But the board has evolved over time, and the kind of sort of requirements in terms of individual giving and in terms of participation within the nonprofit and events and maybe volunteer opportunities has been a little loose. And so I think what we're trying to do is get more of kind of a code that we need to follow and draft that up. And Devin's working really closely with the board. We're also looking at bringing on new members as well. But in general, they have been very supportive. Many of our major donors are actually on the board.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we do have a requirement for the amount of revenue that they're supposed to contribute.
Okay, that's good to know.
They do attend our events and they do some volunteer work as well. But
Yeah.
it's a process that we work through.
Yeah, it's a balance. It's board members are oftentimes volunteering their time, so requiring them to do certain things can sometimes be a difficult ask.
Yeah.
And holding them accountable can also be difficult when they are giving their time and energy and money to the organization.
I'm a board member for a nonprofit called Madonna Mission, and so I do get a perspective on what the challenges are to be a board member, I chair a development committee for that organization.
Okay.
So, I understand how challenging it can be to get the board to join the committee, to get them to make a commitment to their time. These people have very busy lives. They believe in the mission. They want to contribute. But it is a balancing act. So
Yeah.
I definitely understand that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I believe you guys just got a pretty big grant, right, to purchase the new building? Is that what I heard?
So Sky Art has been serving the Chicago community in the South Side for many years. That's where our flagship office is. Back in 2019, we started to provide art instruction to schools on the West Side.
Okay.
So we didn't have a physical presence there, but we have been providing a lot of art instruction in the schools.
Okay.
And we felt like in order to show a real commitment to the community, we wanted to replicate that flagship site. And so we just recently purchased a building in Garfield Park.
Wow.
We're really excited. We're building our community there. I can tell you about, I built a music studio there. I can tell you about that, maybe a fun part later on. But, the capital campaign to be able to acquire the building has been a process that's been going on for quite a while. Because a few years earlier, we were also looking to purchase a building. And for a variety of different reasons, that didn't work out. We went back a little bit to the drawing board to find the right space.
Yeah.
And then we found it. And now we bought it. So now we own two properties in full, clear title, which
wow, that's amazing.
Not many nonprofits own, 15,000 square feet of studio space. We are still fundraising, though, because, we want to cover operational expenses.
Can you explain that a little bit? That's always confused me, and I think some people need to understand how this works, just from a general standpoint.
Yeah. I have not, in my role as a development manager, I have not been involved at the level of our director of development, Basha Brown, and Devin in terms of the capital campaign. But, in order to be able to fund the acquisition and support the acquisition of the building and then the supporting of programs.
Right.
It's not just where you buy the building and then you figure out later where the money's going to come to operate it. Because you also have to maintain your your current operating expenses.
Yeah,
you have
staff too.
Staff,
to get this off the ground. Yeah.
So you build into the capital campaign, a runway of operating expenses as well. And 3 years is usually a reasonable amount of time. Funders of capital campaigns will set some priorities about how long that runway could be. They don't want you to have a huge amount of cash.
Sure.
But as long as you're allocating that for operational expenses,
right,
then they'll be willing to make major capital donations.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys did a campaign to fundraise for the building. You are now continuing this fundraising to fundraise for an additional 3 years of operating expenses. That's kind of what I'm hearing. So you're always fundraising. It never
always
ends.
Fundraising.
Yeah, it never
always.
ends.
And the capital campaign, and that we haven't officially announced it as a campaign where the public, begins to start to make donations. It's still within a group of individuals who were, kind of major donors. Foundations, things like that. That's setting the groundwork. Once we reach a certain level of commitment. This is sort of standard capital campaign protocol. Is that, when you reach about 78, well, it might even more like 80%.
Okay.
Then you announce that final 20% to your donors, to the community, and then you really work hard to push it over the line. So
Okay.
we're not quite there yet, but that's
How
the
long
path.
does something like this take? I mean, to A, strategize, and then B, to actually execute it.
Yeah. Well, we did actually have, we had a campaign to purchase our flagship building, which was back in 2015. We raised $2.5 million for that.
Yeah.
And that included renovations and included, some support for operating expenses. Right. And so that process took, quite a long time. But with the West Side building, I'm going to guess it's maybe been about 5 years or so that we've been involved in that since the
So yeah,
beginning.
quite a long time. It's a lot of work. Yeah.
It does take time, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Well, Rome wasn't built overnight, right?
yeah,
Or whatever
I
that
know,
saying is.
I know you're going to get that going too hopefully within the Art of Giving. You'll
Yeah.
have some space.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll
So-
talk about that. I'm excited to
Okay.
share that with
Good.
you.
Good.
So, when you're, being in development, you have to decide what are the best ways to fundraise. There's so many things, right?
Yeah.
There's just individual donors, there's corporate donors, there's your, your long-term donors or sponsors, your friends of the organization, so to say.
Yeah.
You have other organizations, you have events, you have earned income, you have all these things. So it's a lot to juggle, and you really have to pick, like you said, from your sales background in software, what are your biggest avenues and go after those. So what would you say is, your top 3 that you look at with SkyArt? All right, I'm going to go after these 3 avenues for fundraising.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you just a little story. In the corporate world that I worked in, which was with a $200 million software company that had about 250 employees.
Okay.
So they've been in business for many, many years. They had developed, and I was involved in that process, developing strategies, right? And strategic plans, right? That would be like multi-year strategic plans. So I was pleasantly surprised when I got to SkyArt that they had a 3-year strategic plan.
Yeah.
16 employees. And I thought actually in many ways it was more developed than even the corporate ones.
Yeah.
So that really got me to, kind of appreciate the importance of planning. And so one part of that plan, and it's top down. So, we have the plans for the organization, then we have the plans for operations, development, and programs. So the operations is like HR and finance,
Sure.
programming, including schools and communities, and then the fundraising and development. So we have our strategic plan for fundraising and development, which we've had for 3 years. And I'd say that in thinking about it, for fundraising, you should know your story.
Yeah.
And then you should know your audience.
I hear this all the time from everyone we have on the show.
Good.
Know your story and know who's
All
hearing
right,
it.
then we're all talking the same language.
Yeah.
Because if you know your story and you know your audience, then you can, it's alignment with them, right? But then they can then align with that. They share their values with you. And then you have that connection, right? And so, and that connection then, once it grows, then they can pass the word on to their network. And so it's a little bit like a grassroots approach.
Okay.
There's ways to leverage that to accelerate that rather than, waiting for the phone to ring and everything.
Yeah.
But, I think that's kind of the fundamentals. So if you want to develop like that, get that story out to a receptive audience in the institutional giving side, you have to just find out, what they value, right? And does it align with what your mission is? And there's other fundamentals like, making sure that, you have the capacity to meet the institutional giving requirements.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, that can be a big one too.
Yeah.
As you start going after the bigger fish.
Yeah, but just from, the institutional giving side, the major donor side, again, is that story and that linkage. And then, you can grow your networks from there.
Okay.
So there's other aspects of it, but I think that's kind of the main part.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's obviously, littler, items on the list,
Yeah.
smaller items on the list. Like events might be one of those for some organizations, whereas events for others might be a big portion of their fundraising, or earned income might be a smaller portion or a bigger portion for a smaller organization. So can you explain to us, what how do you choose what events to throw, who to invite? Is there a strategy behind that too? I mean, you seem to be all strategy, so I assume there is, but is there a process behind that where you're like, okay, we're going to throw it during this time of the year, invite these types of donors or these types of guests, and we're going to have these activities, and this is our goal because, or is it just like, hey, let's see what sticks, and throw something at the wall?
Well, the one thing that's consistent in all that when it comes to events is we've used the same name, which is I Heart Art.
Okay.
Then as far as like the overall strategy behind that does evolve, of course, over time.
Yeah.
But I think the important part is to determine like what you want to achieve.
Out of the event.
Out of the event.
Okay.
Right? So it could be, let's say you had a previous event and you want to increase the revenue in that event by, let's say, 10%. So then now that's one element, right? Is the target, right? Another one could be we don't really engage enough with our donors. Obviously during COVID, there was very little engagement.
Absolutely.
So as soon as we came out of that,
we all felt that.
it wasn't just about the revenue. It was like, let's get together. Let's just get together, right, and celebrate. And then after that, now it's also, we're expanding, right? We're moving to the west side. So the event will focus on all the different unique things that we're doing to serve the west side community.
It sounds like your events have a purpose then.
We have a purpose. We set the objectives and the purpose. Then we set the target. And this is standard, certainly operating procedure for any event. And then you define your budget. So, how much is it going to cost? And where are you going to generate the sources of revenue? Right. Ticket sales, auctions,
paddle raise,
which
you were phenomenal at, by the way.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It was really fun. First time
I learned a thing or two. I was like, okay, Dan, okay.
And that wound up being like the big critical part to bring in the major donors. Right? So a strategy with an event is to get your major donors before the event, to kind of lock into a level of commitment.
Right.
And during a paddle raise, when they start to make those commitments, then everything sort of flows down from there. So it gets the energy, excitement.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
I'm just going to back it up because this is something that I've always thought went down at a paddle raise, but couldn't quite put my finger on it. We've always, we've had a gala every year, but we've never done a paddle raise. So this year for our gala, October 12th, we're doing a pallet raise. We had a bunch of our kiddos, draw on some pallets, and they're raising those as their paddles.
Nice.
So we're doing this pallet raise for the first time, and one of the things our director of development had mentioned was we want to make sure we line up our big donors prior to the pallet raise, because there would be nothing worse than saying, do I have a $10,000 sponsor and nobody raises their hand? It's embarrassing for whoever's emceeing. It kills the energy, right? It slows down the whole vibe. So that's obviously something we all do, apparently. So I'm new to that and learning that as well. So
I watched it happen, and it was with a nonprofit that I was just attending the event, and it was the initial level of giving was really high.
I see.
And no one raised their paddles, so you could feel the energy just leaving the room.
Yeah.
So the strategy is, and it makes a lot of sense because they want to give, they're going to give.
Yeah.
So if you get some commitment from your larger donors to a certain level, and ones that are at the highest level, and probably one below it, maybe even one below that. So let's say it's just for example, 10,000, 7,500, 5,000, right? So if you get the $10,000 one, you can get maybe another 10,000, or maybe even have two that are 10,000, right? And you kind of work down.
Yeah.
And then once you're down through that level, you have enough people in the audience that that are mid-range donors that will get excited, and then they'll raise their paddle.
Yeah.
And then when you get to lower levels, then you start to actually add a little fun into it. Like you make some games about it. You do a match. You actually might even have a match at the beginning, perhaps.
True, yeah.
Like a total amount. So those are just some like fun strategies, and then maybe even some things at the end that get you want everyone to be involved. So so that's kind of the approach we did, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, it definitely did. You raised, what was it, 150?
150,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, we were really excited about that.
Yeah, I would be too.
Yeah.
Well, so we touched on some of the, bigger elements of fundraising and just bringing in capital to the organization. I just want to touch on a smaller one, possibly for SkyArt. It's more, I think it's bigger for us than it is for you. We are a lot younger than SkyArt, but is earned income. Yeah. So it's there's this misconception, I feel like, with the nonprofit world that we cannot charge for our services. And in certain aspects, we have to, depending on who we're working with. If we're working with the state or the city or, a state-ran program like a DCFS. We both provide art therapy services, so I think you understand where I'm going with this. Yeah. Sometimes some of the services that we provide and charge for allow us to then bring in enough profit to provide those services to individuals, schools, or other organizations that couldn't afford it. So it just kind of keeps the cog or the wheel going, and so I just wanted to touch on that really quick, and we're running out of time, but I think it's important to, I think you mentioned it's somewhere around 10% of your overall income. For us, it's about 30%. We're still young, and we're still, a lot of what we do is in the schools. So just really quick, can you explain that to?
Yeah, well, I think our organizations provide a service in schools.
Yeah.
And the state provides funding to schools for those kind of services if they're not provided, right?
Right.
So if you're providing those services, you can contract with the schools to get those funds.
Right.
So not every school is providing art teachers, right? Or art curriculum.
Right.
So we're able to reach out to those schools and say, we can provide art instruction, and we get into a contract with them.
Right.
And they actually just wind up, it's like a pass-through of funds from the state, right? So schools do have money to provide services. They may just not have the money allocated to provide the staff.
Sure.
Right? So one of the things that you get to do as a nonprofit, and we're doing, is we get to actually, kind of use our art methodologies in the schools. So we teach social emotional learning and other things about art that they wouldn't normally get from like a traditional art instruction.
Our state ran program, for art that doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah. That's a whole nother topic.
Okay.
Because I'm excited and I want to hear about it, and we are running out of time. So enough about all that. Can you tell me about your music studio?
All right. Yeah, there's a lot of excitement on the West Side. We have never had music as one of the art forms. So it's usually been visual arts. We have the kitchen studio, which is our garden.
Right.
Comes from our garden. Devin suggested that I look to try to build a music studio on the West Side. So I talked with musicians. I got donations. We have a full working studio on our West Side. I have a musician who's coming out actually Wednesday to complete the setup. He's going to hopefully teach a program and then develop a curriculum.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
Music on the West Side. It's coming.
That's
it's coming.
amazing.
Free, and it's free.
Yeah,
so.
Free. Right.
Yeah.
I remember when you were just talking about that. I think my boyfriend gave you a drum set or something like that. I was I don't know what's going on with this, and now it's coming back around, and I'm like,
that's what it was for.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so proud of you guys. That's amazing. Well, it has been a pleasure talking with you. I've definitely learned a lot. I hope everybody else, got some knowledge from that, some wisdom from that. There was a lot there, and I'm really excited to see what you are all going to do at your new facility on the West Side. I'm not far from there. We're not far from there. And please let us know if there's anything we can support you with, and can you let everybody else know where they can find you, whether it's a website or...
Yeah, it's www.skyart.org, and we have our flagship is in South Chicago, and we have our new studio in Garfield Park that's at 3450 West Lake Street. So check us out.
Awesome.
Come on, stop by. We'll start programs in January of 2025. We'll officially be starting programs, and
Wow.
We had a big arts festival recently. We have what's kind of fun, if you don't mind me telling you a little bit about.
We have a minute. Let's go.
Heart and Craft on Lake is a collaborative of 4 nonprofits that just happen to be about 300 yards from each other on Lake Street, just north of Garfield Park. Firebird Community Arts.
We love Pearl.
Revolution Workshop,
Yeah.
which had their gala just, I think it was just last night, and Inspiration Kitchens. So what we're trying to do is be more efficient in how we provide our resources to the west side.
I love this, and
Yeah.
that's definitely something to touch on in
Yeah.
another episode.
Sure, yeah.
Because,
The collective
the
funding
collective, right? Yeah, working together and not reinventing that wheel.
Yeah.
Using each other's resources and networks. It's so important.
model. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dan.
Thank
It's
you.
Great to have you.
Autumn,
Nice to
it's
have
always
you.
a pleasure seeing you.
Yes, you too.
Yeah.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.